Need a tow? The man with the beard asked, stepping out of his Ford pickup truck with a hitch on the back of it. He looked like a lumberjack, big boots, red checkered unbuttoned shirt thrown over a grease-stained white t-shirt, and overwashed faded blue jeans. He had a ball of tobacco in his cheek, and he spit it onto the ground, the brown liquid dripping down his chin. He didn't make any attempt at wiping it away. A middle-aged man kneeling down next to a silver Lincoln Continental waved him away. All good here, buddy. It's just a flat. A girl with long, wavy blonde hair opened the passenger side door and hopped out. For Christ's sake, Jim, can't you take help for once? I mean, really, what's the harm in that? Huh? She looked at the lumberjack and smiled. Got a spare we can use? The lumberjack asked, stomping over to a now standing Jim. That might be a problem, Jim said. Are you telling me we came all the way cross country and you didn't even pack a spare? The girl said, her face turning red with anger. Jim shrugged. The lumberjack smiled and finally wiped the brown oozing liquid from his lip. It's not a problem, miss. Really. I've got one back at my shop. That would be great, Jim said, reaching out his hand. The lumberjack took it and shook, and Jim winced at the surprising strength that was being used. You folks want to ride along or stay here? The girl looked at Jim. What do you think? It's starting to get dark, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you didn't pack flashlights either. Jim shrugged his shoulders, then looked at the lumberjack. We'll come along if it isn't too much trouble. Unfortunately, he looked at the girl, didn't bring any flashlights. Didn't think we needed them. Hell, I didn't even think we would need a spare tire. But here we are. Isn't that right, Chris? She rolled her eyes at him and followed the lumberjack to his pickup truck. Might be a little messy in there, so just shove whatever you need to aside. Most of it isn't important, anyways. Chris was the first one in, then Jim, then the lumberjack. When Chris got in, she picked up a day-old newspaper and stopped, horrified when she read the front cover. It described the disappearances of two different couples in the area within the past 3 months. She shoved it in the back with everything else when the lumberjack hopped in, her heart starting to race. Looking around for a seat belt, her hands slightly shaking now, she came up empty. When the lumberjack saw this, he smiled. Sorry about that, folks, but I don't have any belts in here. Not much goes on around here, so no need to be too safe, if you catch my drift. The girl smiled weakly and nudged Jim. He looked at her, confused. She stealthily tilted her head toward the door. At first, Jim didn't know what she was pointing at, but then he saw, and when he did, a shiver ran down his back. There was no handle on the inside of the door. Once you were in the truck, the only way out was if someone let you out, or you climbed over the driver's seat where the lumberjack was sitting. So where you two headed, anyways? He asked. Jim cleared his throat. Las Vegas, he said. Oh yeah? The lumberjack said. Gonna play some slots and get trashed, Arya? He grabbed an empty Mountain Dew bottle and spit into it. The girl smiled nervously. Something like that. We aren't much of gamblers. Not much of drinkers, either. The lumberjack looked sideways at the, raising an eyebrow. No gambling and no drinking, he said. Well, why in the hell are you going to Vegas? Then, what else is there to do there? Oh, I know why you're going there, he said. Never mind. Jim looked at him. Why? He asked. The ladies, he said. You two are into some freaky stuff. Yup, I'm sure of it. Gonna go see some of those peep shows and maybe get yourself some nice hookers? Excuse me? Chris said, her face turning a dark shade of red. Jim laughed nervously. No, it's nothing like that. We're actually making a trip to see Chris' brother, Sam. He lives in Las Vegas. The lumberjack said, MHM, and turned off onto a windy road shaded by thick pine trees. Where are we going? Chris asked. The lumberjack didn't answer her. He kept his eyes glued to the windshield. Both Chris and Jim stared at each other. So, where's this shop of yours at, anyway? I didn't think it was this far. The lumberjack ignored the question and instead said, A pretty girl like you must have made a lot of men jealous growing up. I'm sure your big brother had to fight a few of them off. Yeah? Her face grew even redder. Sweat began to perspirate on the back of Jim's neck. Hey, knock it off. Man, that's not appropriate. The lumberjack pulled his arm to his side and with all his strength launched an elbow right into Jim's face. Blood spurted from his nose and Jim, throwing his hands up to his face, fell into Chris' lap. Jim, Chris screamed. Jim didn't answer. Instead, he was making low growling animal sounds. What the fuck did you do that for? Chris yelled at the lumberjack, who was now taking another, even windier turn. He smiled. Pretty girl like you shouldn't use such strong language. It's a turn-off, you know? Chris stared at him, aghast. My nose, Jim said. I think he broke my nose. The lumberjack laughed. Shut the fuck up, pretty boy, or I'll give you another elbow to the face. See if I can break a couple of cheekbones. Please let us go, Chris said, her hands shaking with fear. I saw you pick up that newspaper when you got in, sweetheart. They had it coming. The men were cooperative, sure. But the women? They pissed me off. Yes, they did. They pissed me off big. Wouldn't let me touch them. Back talked to me like I'm some sort of idiot. Called me a creep. The last one did. Yup. Called me a creep and tried to hit me. I didn't like that much. Jim didn't lift his head from Chris' blood-stained pants. He only wept softly like an animal that stepped into a bear trap. Where are you taking us? Chris asked, petting Jim's head gently at an attempt to ease his pain. Where I took the others, sweetheart. You'll see. 15 minutes later, the lumberjack pulled the pickup truck onto an overgrown path off the side of the road. When he finally parked the truck, Chris' heart began to race. Oh my God, she whispered, staring at a massive open grave filled with 4 lifeless bodies.